All right, so I got some really big stories to talk about. It is Remembrance Day, so I am going to make a specific video about that later today, so stay tuned for that. But getting into the first big story here from Pierre Poilievre, talking about this Liberal MP that was laundering money. I think it was to her sister. I don't know exactly how much it was, to be honest. If it was the exact amount may have been reported. I just didn't see it. If it's like a really small amount, then honestly, I mean, she should have to pay it back no matter how much it is. But if it's a small amount, it's not that big of a story. Like Mike Duffy wasn't that big of I think it was like what 60, $70,000 or something like that. I mean, depending on who you are, I mean, for me that's quite a bit of money, but for someone making 150, 200 a year, that's not that much. But either way, they should have to pay it back. But the main story, and if they don't have the money to pay it back, they should take it out of their salary. I mean, long story short, they should take it back some way, right? No matter how they have to do it. But anyway, the main point here being is just the brazen corruption that's going on within government these days, specifically the Canadian government. In that, the thing I always bring up too with people is that people talk about third world countries and how corrupt their governments are, and I always just laugh at these people, like just laugh at them, like we're not we're not much different. In fact, I'd say we're hardly in. There's very little difference. I think the biggest difference is that we actually think that we don't, or at least the average person thinks that we don't have a corrupt government. I think the biggest difference is that their people know they're corrupt, and a lot of people are fine with the corruption, and that higher IQ populations or populace tend to be less corrupt. The only difference is that inevitably you kind of, unless you're very much pro free market, pro rule of law, you're gonna slide towards the less free market, less rule of law, more corruption route. And that is what we are doing in Canada, because we have a government that doesn't really believe in rule of law, doesn't really believe that the rules should have to apply to them. Where we have mass immigration, we're importing tons of people that are used to that kind of corruption, and it's a very big myth that you take these people from third world countries and they just miraculously change their values overnight, and that's not how it works. Some of them definitely do. Again, people always bring up, oh, I know a guy who immigrated in from wherever and he believes in the free market or something along those lines. And again, that's not an argument. That's like saying that there's a short guy in the NBA, therefore you don't have to, on average, you don't have to be taller to be in the NBA, right? That doesn't make any sense. Just because there's exceptions to the rule doesn't mean the rules don't exist. So again, that's something to point out. But the main thing to point out here is that people nowadays are far too tribal to figure this out. I think there's a lot of people that just don't care. I think those people are very much responsible as well. And here's the thing: I think that the reason why most people they don't really want to get involved with this kind of stuff is that knowledge is responsibility. This is why so many people are so dumbed down these days. In that, the minute you start thinking for yourself, you quickly realize just how little you actually know, and just how much propaganda you've been fed throughout your life, right? Through public schools and TV and all that garbage. That's pretty much the first thing you find out. And the more you do, the worse the worse you realize it was. And the average person recognizes that, and they don't want to get involved, and they don't want to educate themselves, because like I say, knowledge is responsibility. If you're well aware of all the garbage that's going on, if you're well aware of just how bad things are, you feel like a bit of an idiot if you don't do something about it, which is why most people refuse to think for themselves in the first place, right? So this is why I think this kind of stuff goes on. Is that, I mean, number one, people are way too tribal. I mean, Justin Trudeau can do no wrong amongst his supporters, and a lot of the conservatives are too blinded by their hatred of Trudeau to do anything about it. And again, who's right on these issues? I mean, it's not the liberals. It's not the liberals, but they know that they can get away with it. This is the big problem in Canada, is that we have a government right now that knows, even though they don't have a majority, But they have a de facto majority because they know the NDP will always side with them, especially when push comes to shove, right? Like the NDP may, Jagmeet Singh loves to get up on his high horse and talk about how, oh, Justin Trudeau did this wrong and that wrong, but when it comes right down to it to actually call him out, then he doesn't do it because he knows that if the only real way to actually stand on principle would be to force an election, and they're not going to do that because they would lose seats, which just goes to show that they don't actually care in the end. But anyway, like I say, this is another bad sign for Canada that this kind of corruption can just go on unabated, and no one really cares. I mean, the mainstream media is barely talking about it. I mean, again, when Mike Duffy had his thing, it was massive in the news. This was kind of just when I was first starting to pay attention to the news a little bit. I remember it was all over the news. But yeah, this kind of stuff happens and nobody cares. So anyway, the next big thing to talk about is there's talk of lockdowns is going on in pretty much all the major provinces. I mean, Toronto already has kind of lockdown. Manitoba's kind of lockdown. And Alberta, again, the numbers are up and everybody's all paranoid about it. So this is from Love for Alberta on Twitter here saying, contact Premier Kenney, say no to lockdown. And then she gives the info here, the email address and a mailing address. So again, if you are from Alberta, you need to send off an email, send a letter, do something. And this is what people always bring up. Always bring up, oh well, what can we do? What can we do to make a difference? You got to make your voice heard. You take 5 or 10 minutes to write an email, right? Like how hard can it be? Write the premier, write your city councilors, write your mayors. It takes 10, 15 minutes tops. Write up an email on Microsoft Word, copy and paste it, send it to everybody you can. Right? It doesn't take that long. It's not that hard. Because again, you better believe that all these paranoid Karens are doing that, right? You better believe these are people that they're just retired or they got nothing better to do, and they're doing it, right? They're doing it. All these people who are just retired and have nothing better to do and that sit around all day watching CBC and are walking around with their tinfoil hats, all paranoid, right? So again, please, please, for the love of God, do what you can, right? Like I say, it doesn't take that long, right? It doesn't take that long. Just send a letter, send an email, get on the phones. I don't think the premier's office has a phone number to call. It would probably be flooded. That's probably why. But if you can, get on the phone, do whatever it takes, right? Like do whatever it takes. Not only that, too, you got to share, support, and share people that are out there speaking the truth, whether it's me or other people. This is something that people watching this are probably exceptions to the rule, but there's a lot of people that don't believe in a lot of this garbage. That again, they don't believe in these stupid lockdowns and all that stuff, but yet they kind of just sit on their hands, right? They kind of just sit on their hands, and that's something that we really have to change. Like we really have to change that. So anyway, make sure you get that done. This is from Corey Morgan here. Now, last week the NDP were calling for the UCP to condemn uh, separation and the Alberta having its own pension plan and all this garbage. And again, Corey Morgan points out a good point here that I pointed out before. But anyway, have your boss or Jagmeet condemned Quebec yet for having their own pension plan? Now again, whenever you bring up Alberta having its own police force or Alberta having its own pension plan, all these leftists, they just shriek in terror. Oh, you can't do that. Kenney's going to have his Gestapo and all this absolute, calling it hyperbolic is an understatement. Like, again, it's just such insanity that, Ontario can have its own police force, Quebec can have its own police force, and it's not a Stasi. Doug Ford's not a Liberal or an NDP, but yet, is he ever called, does he have his own? No. And when it comes, again, Quebec has its own pension plan. Just, is there any criticism of them ever? No. This is what I cannot stand about the left, in that if they would actually be honest about it, um, at least we could have open and honest conversations. But considering the fact that they're not, it's pretty much impossible. And I'll tell you why is that they're not honest about their intentions. Their intentions have everything to do with power. I always wonder, okay, well, how can these people have such contradictory beliefs? Like the mental gymnastics that they must play is absolutely insane. But yet, on the other hand, I think to myself, they have no principles. All they care about is power, which is why they can actually have the beliefs that they have, and yet still have a conscience, right? Like, because for me, I wouldn't be able to have a conscience. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I had such contradictory beliefs as these people. But considering the fact that all they care about is power, all of a sudden it makes sense. Like all of a sudden it makes sense when you think about it from those from that point of view, I guess. And the last thing to bring up is again, James O'Keefe continues to uncover more and more examples of voter fraud. There's seemingly a new thing coming out every day, another big example of voter fraud. I think Georgia is ordering a recount today because theirs was clearly, I mean, there's several states that were clearly a lot of shady stuff going on. And the craziest thing that I wanted to bring up today is how the mainstream media can go on about, oh, there's no evidence of voter fraud. Like, just the bias and the absolute insanity of the mainstream media is insane. Like, they went off for years about Russia collusion when there was no evidence of it. An independent investigation that spent like $40 million trying to find dirt found nothing. And yet you still have most people on the left that believe in Russia collusion, even though there's literally no evidence of it. And the evidence that they discovered implicates the Obama administration, right? But yet they still believe in Russia collusion. But yet we have several examples of clear cut, crystal clear, cut and dry voter fraud. And yet they say, oh, there's no evidence, right? Like it's such insanity. It's such insanity. So anyway, that's the last thing I wanted to bring up there. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you follow me on all those platforms. I got 3 other ones. Those links are all in the description. Make sure you check me out. Make sure you support me. Um, if you want to donate, you can do that as well. But again, I appreciate whatever support I can get. I'm like I say, I'm very much appreciative of whatever support I can get. So make sure you check out those links and stay tuned for more.